What's up, guys? We're back with the bike project. Another week, another video. Let me get it pulled out here. It's currently parked. Got a little bit of a mess going on in the shop, but I think we have enough room to see what's going on with the bike. Get this out of the way. Alright, so where we left off in the last video was the modification of the frame to install the torque converter. And I'll just readjust here. And as you can see, I've obviously gotten that done and got the torque converter installed. So let me grab my, if I can find it, 5/16 wrench, and I'll take the cover off and show you what was required. And I've only put a few miles on it for testing purposes. I want to put a few more on just to make sure everything is set and I can leave it the way it is. So for now, I don't want to say this is an official way that you're going to leave things adjusted, but it should be pretty dang close. Just get one more bolt out. I was able to retain 3 of my 4 mounting bolts, so that was a good thing. And actually, in another video in the future, I'm going to do away with the plastic cover, and I'll show you what my idea is instead. I think for the look of the bike, it's a little bit too modern. I'm kind of going for an old board tracker style racer, like 1900s era racing bike. If you look up board track racer, you'll see what I'm talking about. But this plastic cover kind of makes it look too futuristic for that. So what I want to do is just pick up some sheet metal and be able to keep this exposed so you can see the moving parts, but I'll just trim a piece of sheet metal kind of like a shield right around this top side that'll just overhang the clutch. That way when my leg's there, it's not going to hit that. And then I'll probably end up putting maybe like some rubber on the edge of that steel to protect the edge so it's not a sharp edge. Either that, or I'll cut another piece and weld it on and have it be a 90-degree angle so there's not a sharp edge, there's just kind of a more gentle. It's hard to explain now, but that's the idea for the future. So anyways, as far as fitment and modification, let me bring you in close and show you. Actually, I'll take you to the other side for starters. It's a little easier to see. So, it's a little rough right now. It's not completely done, but what I had to do is make a little bit bigger notch than I was thinking. We're looking straight on here, and I would say we're roughly halfway through that seat tube. So this diameter, I think it's like 3/4 or 1 inch pipe. We're about halfway through that. On each side it's even. I tried to even it out with a grinder. So this is a combination of my die grinder and what else did I use? A 4.5 inch cutoff wheel on an angle grinder, and then I also used a little bit of my Sawzall to do that. So that's what I had to do to the frame. And then in order to pull, it's easiest to show you from the top. In order to pull this in so that it was roughly a straight line, you can see it's a little bit beyond straight. And the reason I had to go a little bit beyond is so that my belt didn't rub on the backing plate down here. So it is a little bit beyond tracking in a straight line, but I think that's where I'm going to leave it. I might be able to go back a little bit and be okay, but that's all adjustable through our mounting kit. They leave you enough slop in that mounting plate that you can have that fine-tuning adjustment and space it out with washers and things like that. So this is where I've got it for now, and I'll drive it quite a bit in the next couple weeks as it warms up outside and keep you updated with how it goes. But anyways, what I was talking about is in order to get that pulled in far enough, it's a little hard to show, but on this backing plate there's these 3 gussets on the back side, and then there's a couple more, one up here and one down here, that aren't in the way. But these 3 ran into the frame. So I actually had to put a 90-degree notch in each of the three of those using my cutoff wheel in order to pull the torque converter in further and get the belt tracking properly. One nice thing is that my rear pulley has a deep enough groove in it. The belt rides so far down in there, there's not really a risk of the belt ever falling off. And on the same note, up here, it's jammed in between the backing plate and the driven clutch, so there's no way it can fall off up there. Originally, if I remember right, with the centrifugal clutch, I had a 69-inch belt, and now, what is this? I think it's a 66. So that's a little surprising. I should double check that. I don't want to give you the wrong information. If I can turn this, we'll see what size we have here as it comes around. Yep, so this is a 68-66. That's a 66-inch belt. And where's my old one? If I run around here, I think it's over here on the bench. The old belt was a 68-69. So 3 inches shorter to go from centrifugal clutch to torque converter. Alright, I'll set you back down, and I'm going to take off this primary clutch and show you what I had to do there to get that to work with our adapter sleeve. That's just going to be a 1/2-inch bolt. So we'll pull that off. And again, this is not a final way of doing things yet. I want to make sure everything holds together okay and runs alright before I finalize things, but for now, this I believe is a 2.5-inch 5/16 by 24 thread bolt. We've got a 1/4-inch washer. That's one little trick I don't know if you knew, is with regular flat washers, at least standard, one size smaller is what fits the bolt. So for a 5/16 bolt, a 1/4-inch fits nice and snug, where a 5/16 washer has a little bit of slop, so that's nice. Alright, so we've got that out. I've got to check here, I think I got a message. Nope, we're alright. Okay, then we have our bell here, that's what I'm calling it. And we've got our clutch. And then you can see, just by chance, I ended up cutting off, I can't even tell you, probably 1 inch of the original sleeve. What I would recommend is don't cut this off at all until you've got everything on, and then cut off to size at that point. What I had done is I didn't have the final assembly all together, and I went ahead and cut this off thinking I knew what it needed to be. And that may have been a mistake, but I got lucky and have enough left over. So let's pull the rest of this off, and I'll show you what I did here. Let's see. I need to grab something to pry that off with here. I've got you resting on the toolbox, so everything's hidden underneath the camera. There we go. Nothing better to pry it off with than a Phillips screwdriver, huh? Wow, that's a good sign. This is really on there. I may not be able to even show you what I've got going. Yeah, I'm just going to leave that on. It's a nice, good fit. I don't want to pull it off, but I can still explain what I have, and I'll show you. So, the issue that I ran into is that on a 3/4 shaft motor that this torque converter is meant for, there's a step in the shaft that this inside sheave, I guess you'd call it, of the clutch slides down against, and it stops before it hits this backing plate, or even worse, it hits the seal, the crankshaft seal on the motor. So I needed a way to stop this from sliding in, basically. Because if it slid in any further, it's going to hit the seal on the motor, and then it also bottoms out on our mounting bolts. So that's an issue. One thing that I came up with originally was there's a 2-inch hole right down in there. There's a 2-inch hole in this torque converter plate. And so I thought I'll just go get a 2-inch outer diameter bearing and knock it in there. It doesn't really matter what the inside hole is, as long as it's not bigger than like 1.5 inches. And so that would knock into this, and then this would have something to bottom out against. That kind of worked, but not really. The bearing was so big that it didn't really have a nice feel to it. It was pretty tight. And so when I tried to start the engine, it was too tight. I couldn't even start the motor because it couldn't spin freely enough. So then it suddenly had dawned on me, which I don't know why I didn't think of this originally, was that all I needed was a 5/8, which is our shaft, or you could do 3/4 if you incorporated the sleeve, but my recommendation would be 5/8, a 5/8 locking collar. And I wanted to have a split shaft locking collar. This one is solid where it just has a set screw, but a split shaft would be similar to my headlight mount up here where it's 2 halves with 2 Allen screws on each side. And you can get it a little bit tighter that way around the shaft. But this one is just a regular locking collar, and it slides on all the way down to the slight step. There's just a small step in these 5/8 shaft motors. Slides down that far, and then I put my set screw right into the keyway. So you can see our set screw there, and just tightened it down into the keyway. And it could actually sit on there and spin if I wanted it to, because with that step in the shaft, it can't go any further. So I've got that, and that keeps this from bottoming out, and the shaft just, the collar just spins with the shaft of the engine, the crankshaft. So, in closing, I guess, on that, our final assembly is that locking collar. Then we have the original washer that came with the torque converter. And you'll just have to experiment. The reason I added the washer is to get the torque converter belt tracking straight. You want to make sure that's straight. So we've got the washer, the inner sheave, this bronze bushing, and then we'll put it back together here. Our collar, I guess you'd call this. I don't really know the correct terminology, but that slides on. And one thing I should mention quickly before I put this back, I can't think of the name. The sleeve, the adapter sleeve, sorry. The adapter sleeve comes with an extended key, and that would have worked great, except all of these torque converter components are pre-keyed. They have a built-in key. You can look down and see that. So every part that this comes with has a key. There's a key, and there's a key on here, and there's a key on the washers and everything. So it works pretty well. It doesn't quite go all the way down into the engine shaft, but it does go all the way through our sleeve. So what I did there is there's about a 1/2 inch on the back side of this inner sheave where there's no key. So there's about a 1/2 inch before the key starts. I just took my existing key and cut it down to a 1/2 inch. And that gave some support to our adapter sleeve. My concern was if I had enough torque on this that it could actually spin on the crankshaft, since everything belt driven is riding on our sleeve instead of the actual crankshaft keyway. So wherever you can, I did it on the back side of this. I put a small little piece of key to hold this adapter sleeve in place, and then the built-in key on all of your clutch components holds those to the sleeve. I hope that makes sense, and I'm sorry I couldn't show you along the way. I had a dead camera battery, so I wasn't able to film, but anyways, let's continue putting this back together. We've got our inner sheave, and then our little collar, we're calling it. Then we'll take our clutch right here, and that'll line up and slide on. And actually, before I forget, I need to put our belt on. One little trick to getting these belts on, let me actually set you back down as well. Quit making you dizzy with the camera. One little trick to getting these belts back on is to squeeze. So I see people up here just try to pull and they can never get this on. Mine's actually stretched a little bit since it's been used, but you want to squeeze back here and seat it into the secondary driven clutch. So now it's seated down in there, and then I've got plenty of excess to slide it on. So instead of like pulling on the belt and prying on it and things like that, either take a ball peen hammer or just with your hands, squeeze and seat it in there, and then you've got plenty of slack. So now we'll take our collar, slide it on, then the outer sheave with the clutch spring, and then our bell, I'm calling it, and then just our bolt with, there's a couple of locking washers that come with the kit, and they fit right into that keyway. And we'll lock that down. And one thing that's nice is the rotation of the engine tightens the bolt, so you don't need to crush it, but get it pretty tight, and the way it's spinning, the bolt's going to stay tight. As far as I know, there shouldn't be an issue with that. So grab a wrench here. And one last modification that I need to mention that I'm going to work on today, and this will likely be in next week's video, is my exhaust. So originally I didn't have a muffler, and that was because without the torque converter I could only touch about 1/3 throttle, and that's because there was so much load on the engine with that gear ratio that it moved along pretty good just touching the throttle. And that's because that gear ratio was set up to go like 50 or 60 miles an hour, which would never have happened because I just couldn't get into the engine far enough because it doesn't have the torque and it couldn't handle that amount of load. So as a result, my exhaust was just putting along, and it was nice and quiet, and I was able to keep it without a muffler. But now we're able to get all the way into the power range of the engine, and it's a lot louder. So with the higher rev rate, I need to add a muffler. And just temporarily I took a lawnmower muffler. It's got 1/2-inch pipe thread, and this was just a quick fix. I just stuffed it in there and then put a couple spots of weld to hold it. And I'm not going to keep that. It's ugly, and this muffler's way too small for that setup. It's limiting the flow, and it's going right into my gas tank, which is bad. We don't want that. So I actually got myself a tubing bender from a friend, just a cheap Harbor Freight tubing bender. And you could do this with a torch too if you have a torch. I don't have a torch, so tubing bender is what I'm going to have to use. But what I'm going to do is take off all my exhaust wrap, and I'm going to wear gloves this time so I'm not itchy all day. And I'm going to take this off, and I'm going to put a bend, roughly the same bend as the frame, but not quite. I don't want it to be so close to the frame that if it doesn't match perfectly, it looks funny. But what I'm going to do is bend that down, and then a little bit away, I think. I might just go straight, kind of in a straight plane down, but I think I want to bend it away a little bit, like at a 30-degree angle roughly, but we'll see what ends up happening with that. And then, finally, I'll bend that down, cut off this cheap little muffler that I used temporarily, and if I go over to my parts box here, where are we at? I think in here. I've got a 3/4 inch pipe threaded muffler, and it's much bigger. You can see in comparison, it's probably double the size. And lastly, I got a sleeve, or just a coupler, and that way I have the option of removing the muffler. So if I want to go for like a power run, or in the future if things change and it's able to not be so loud because I changed the gear ratio or whatever, I can just unscrew the muffler and I can screw it back in whenever I want and not have to cut a weld and re-weld it or do whatever. So in the end, it's kind of hard to picture, but this is going to come up to here roughly and make a slight bend down, and our exhaust is going to sit about like that is what I'm picturing. That way I keep it up off the cover and keep it off my legs. So that's what I'm going to work on today, and you will see that likely in the next part, along with the new front brake that I got. This is identical to the rear. They call it a front versus a rear, but I think it's the exact same. So also in the next part, I'm going to install our front brakes. So we've got front and rear brakes. Okay, that's all I've got for today. And thank you for watching. Comment if you have any questions. Otherwise, like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video.